What does the 1987 film The Princess Bride and Goblin Quest the RPG have in common? In today's episode, we are going to pick up rules hack number 2 for Goblin Quest the RPG. My name is Inigo Montoya, Jr. You will learn how you can play this hack the next time you and your crew gather around the gaming table. Welcome to Claim to Game, the podcast helping busy people master tabletop role-playing games one game at a time. I'm Clint.scheirer. I've been an educator for over 12 years and have helped gamers of all levels quickly grasp tabletop RPGs so they can enjoy playing them to the fullest. Stay tuned so you can make your claim to game. Hello and welcome back to episode 15, season 1 of Claim to Game, a predominantly educational fun podcast in which I am daring to coin the word funjucational. It's like if you decided to eat dirt and it magically turned into Oreo dirt cake with gummy worms instead of actual dirt. The game for this season is Goblin Quest the RPG, brought to you by game designer Grant Howitt, whose works include, but are not limited to, Honey Heist, Die the RPG, Spire, Unbound, One Last Job, Heart, Eat the Reich, and now at the time of this episode release, the new tabletop RPG, Hollows, being funded through BackerKit. Take a look at the show notes if you want to plunge into the nightmare realms and back today. Our running definition of a rules hack for Goblin Quest is a series of tweaks and twists to the main game which allow you to use it to tell different stories. The second of these hacks to appear in the Goblin Quest RPG book on page 72, earned through the Kickstarter stretch goals in 2014, is My Name is Inigo Montoya, Jr. Being human, we've all had those days when we're sick, tired, and want nothing more to do than sleep all day in bed. And if you're like me, instead of sleeping, you end up binge watching a show on Hulu, Netflix, Disney Plus, or one of the other vast number of streaming platforms. Or, if you're like me, you might be tempted to jump into that video game you enjoy, but rarely feel like you have time for. And this seems to be the case for Fred Savage's character at the beginning of The Princess Bride, directed by Rob Reiner. The opening scene of this movie shows a little boy, sick in bed, playing Hardball, a 1985 game produced for the Commodore 64 computer system. His then very stereotypical old grandfather, played by the late actor Peter Falk, known for 60s TV drama Columbo, who, by the way, had a glass eye since the age of 3, his old grandfather brings in a book to read to his grandson called The Princess Bride. And the grandfather is sure that his grandson is going to like it. And just like that, the audience, along with the boy, is sucked into a story of fencing, fighting, torture, revenge, giants, monsters, chases, escapes, true love, and miracles. Doesn't sound too bad, right? We'll try to stay awake. Of all the colorful, unique, and iconic characters within this story, there is one that sticks out as a main player and central character to the narrative, and that is the Spaniard swordsman out for revenge, Inigo Montoya. This character was played by Chicago-born actor Mandy Patinkin, who has been quoted saying of all the roles he's played over the years, this one was his favorite. His inspiration for this part was the real-life loss of his father due to cancer, and channeling his feelings over that experience into this performance made for a very emotionally impactful delivery. And for many dedicated fans of this cult classic, Inigo Montoya is beloved for his tragic story of witnessing the murder of his father at the hands of a six-fingered man. The quest for revenge is the storytelling vehicle for the Goblin Quest hack, My Name is Inigo Montoya, Jr. In the movie, after training for years to be a master swordsman, hunt down his father's murderer, and confront and kill the six-fingered man, Inigo plans to deliver the following badass catchphrase at the moment of his revenge. Hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die. Quick pause on the episode. Are you enjoying Season 1 of the Claim to Game podcast but feel like Goblin Quest the RPG is just not the tabletop RPG for you? What if you could take charge of your discontent? What if you could do something about it? Well, let me tell you, friend, you can. Once today's episode ends, take a moment to click on the link in the show notes for the Season 2 What Game Should We Play Next survey. This survey will be open for all of June 2024, and then it will close. So go ahead, cast your vote for the game that will float your boat. Thanks. Now back to the episode. This Goblin Quest rules hack is best played with 5 players in GM-less mode. For more about GM-run games versus GM-less games, feel free to check out Episode 9. Your group can decide whether you want to create 5 separate characters, like how you made 5 separate goblins in Goblin Quest, or you can create just one character who has a total of 10 wounds. In Goblin Quest, each goblin could incur 2 wounds before dying. So imagine you somehow melted all your goblins together using the dark magic of Saruman the White from Lord of the Rings, and all 5 of your goblins together would have a combined number of wounds of 10. Your sword fighter character in this game is like that, except more like a human sword fighter instead of a bunch of melted together goblins. So here's our premise. You are an 18th century sword fighter. Someone killed someone close to you. You've sworn revenge. And now it's time to set up the game. Your first step in taking revenge is figuring out who is it that you are avenging. You can choose from one of the suggested names on page 72 or come up with the name of some other poor soul whose life was cut short by the villain. Our poor soul's name was Sigourney McKnight. The history of the word villain is interesting. In the 7th to 15th century, its medieval Latin root, villainous, referred to the inhabitants of a villa, which was a part of a village, a rural group of dwellings. Since the aristocracy of the European Middle Ages had all the power and may have been a tad bit snooty and unjust, the word villainous came to be used to refer to the villager of uncouth manners. And having manners in the Middle Ages and the aristocracy was equivalent to being a morally sound person, which that way of thinking is highly problematic, if not outright incorrect. But nonetheless, this gave birth to the word villain, meaning scoundrel or criminal. And let me tell you, whoever killed this person you are avenging not only had poor, uncouth manners, but also is a scoundrel and criminal in every sense of the word. Each person at the table will take a turn sharing one fact they know about the murderer to help track them down. There are some examples on page 72, but I'm going to come up with my own. And here I'm assuming that I'm playing with a group of 5 people. Here's what we have to go off of. 1. She is a woman who always wears a cloak of fine silver thread. 2. Her voice sounds as though she smokes a pack of cigs a day. 3. Whenever she kills another victim, she always leaves a lotus flower on their corpse. 4. Her weapon of choice is a samurai's katana made of pure copper. And 5. Everyone in the criminal underground refers to her as the branded blade, because her right hand was branded with the mark of a known disbanded group of freedom fighters. Go ahead and take these facts and write them down so they can be front and center for everybody to see during play. If you're playing in person, write them down on a sheet of paper that everybody can reach, or a poster paper or whiteboard that everybody is able to view. If your game is online or digital, send a quick attachment via email to your crew, or make a document accessible through a shared cloud drive or your virtual tabletop of choice. Next, it's time for your character creation. To streamline this episode, I'm going to go with the Mega Goblin concept, or in this case, Mega Sword Fighter, with only playing one sword fighter from the 18th century with a total of 10 wounds that I can incur before biting the dust. So, go ahead and write down the name of your sword fighter. A quick Google search can help you with random possible names, and since we're talking 18th century, I literally typed in a Google search for Musketeer Name Generator, which led me to the name generator for the French Renaissance names. Our fighter, who will avenge the poor Sigourney McKnight, our fighter's name is Crespin Picard. Sounds like the name of a cheap-ass wine or maybe cologne. If there's an actual Crespin Picard who is listening, I take it all back. So go ahead and briefly jot down a few notes of what your fighter looks like, and don't get too hung up on this. Crespin in our case, is a middle-aged, balding man, yet he has the most beautiful handlebar mustache a man could ever hope to grow. He's also super swole, bro, but not like a bro. He's actually fairly kind and considerate as a person and not too full of himself, nor too empty of himself. Next, you'll need to choose your enthusiasm. You can be enthusiastic about your sword fighting, combat, or everything else. Whenever you describe your character performing an action that falls in the realm of your enthusiasm, then you get to add an extra dice roll to your roll pool. Sweet! And now it's time to decide how you were connected to the deceased person you were avenging. You can use the table on page 73 or come up with your own connection. Also, consider how you know these other sword fighters who are also seeking revenge. Remember, you are playing with 5 other players. One thing I really love about the tabletop RPG Fiasco by Jason Morningstar is that the game forces you to have a relationship connection to the person sitting next to you at the table, both to your right and to your left. It builds an extra level of verisimilitude, which means the appearance of being true or more real. Real people have real connections. If the deceased person was important to you, your character's connections will interconnect with other avenging sword fighters fairly clearly. For Crespin Picard, he was Sigourney McKnight's business partner and friend. They grew up together and eventually started a large farming operation which grew, harvested, and sold okra. As time went on, Crespin's passion for cooking led him to start up a restaurant on the farm's estate, which people would frequent for miles around. Its name was Crespin's Krispies. Its specialty dish was fried chicken tenders with a side of deep-fried okra. Okay, did I need to create the whole story there? No. It would have sufficed to just say business partner, but like Hugh Neutron told his son Jimmy Neutron Boy Genius, you kids, good luck tonight, and remember, have fun with it. And nothing says fun like character death. Nothing. Just like in Goblin Quest RPG, if a character sword fighter dies, and this is assuming that you're playing with 5 separate sword fighters, you move on to your next character. Now, you can choose to roll your characters up during the game by rolling a new relationship, character name, determining their enthusiasm, whether it's swordplay or everything else. And then you get to roll and choose a fun way that you introduce your character into the game at the beginning of your next turn. And when in doubt, jumping through a window, riding in on a horse where a horse should not be ridden, or kicking down a door will feel oh so good. Or you could save us all time by rolling all these up in advance so that you don't have to do it during the game. Now, if you are playing with 5 sword fighters and they die, or if you choose to play like I am with the Mega Sword Fighter that has 10 wounds, then you can just refer to the NPC rules found on page 47 of the core Goblin Quest rules so that you can keep playing. You're a player. When you attempt to do anything in the game that would require a dice roll, per the usual, you always get to roll at least 1d6. If you do something that is related to your chosen enthusiasm, you get to add another dice to your roll. Each dice's result will be interpreted using the results table on page 42. My name is Inigo Montoya Jr. has a unique mechanic called the speech. And this is in reference to Inigo Montoya's revenge speech he has planned to give when he is ready to challenge the 6-fingered man who has killed his father in the Princess Bride movie. Do you remember it? Hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die. Yeah, that could get old real quick if everybody just keeps quoting the movie every 3 to 5 minutes. So, this hack limits the amount of emotional speeches and adds an element of strategy to when you can give your moving rhetoric. First, how does the speech mechanic work when you use the mode where each player has 5 sword fighters? Each character can only deliver the speech once. If you decide to give your speech at the same time as your action, you can add 1 additional dice to your dice pool roll for every one of your characters who has died before you in your character lineup. You also get to add a dice for the deceased person you are avenging. For example, if player Chet, and I always feel like I have to say the name Chet in the following voice, if Chet has already had 2 characters die in action, then in addition to his given 1d6, he can add 3 more 6-sided dice to his roll, 2 for his dead sword fighters and 1 for the deceased person. For a good measure, if he's using his enthusiasm, he can add another 1d6. Counting them all up, that is equal to 5 six-sided dice. And remember, each dice's result is interpreted separately using the table on page 42. So what do you do with the speech mechanic when you are playing with a mega sword fighter who has 10 wounds? Easy. Still keep it dramatic by saying you only get to deliver the speech once per game. For every 2 wounds incurred, you get to add a dice to your dice pool. 2 wounds is equivalent to 1 sword fighter dying if you were playing in the regular game mode. Don't forget to add 1 extra dice to include the deceased person. So here's our example. Let's say Chet has a mega sword fighter. His name is Prespin Picard, the doppelganger of Crespin Picard. Prespin has incurred a total of 4 wounds, which gives him 2 extra dice. He also gets another dice for the deceased person. That means with the 1 he starts out with, the 2 he received because of his wounds, and the 1 for the deceased person, he is going to roll 4 six-sided dice for his action when he gives the speech. Here are a few final notes when making the speech move. The speech does not have to be delivered to the villain, but to any NPC that may get in your way for revenge. During your delivery of the speech, you need to swap out the relationship and name of the person you are avenging with Inigo's original words. And lastly, if you mess up the speech in any way, your character instantly dies a messy death. When playing the normal mode of this game with 5 sword fighters, that would mean one of your sword fighters would die, which is a total of 2 wounds. If you're playing the Mega Sword Fighter version, you might just want to say your Mega Sword Fighter instantly incurs 2 wounds, so you don't have to go straight to playing the NPC rules. The plot of the story has 6 main points: the killing, the training, the investigation, the tipping point, the evil scheme, and the foiling, or the revenge. Let's take a look at each one separately. First, the killing. This is the event that started it all. Someone close to you is going to be murdered, and you are going to witness it, and the villain will rebuff you because he is strong and you are weak, at least for now. Take turns establishing facts about the scene around the table. For the murder of Sigourney McKnight, business partner of Crespin Picard, here is how it went down. 1. It was a dark and stormy night. 2. The time was right after closing at Crespin Krispies. Not a chicken tender or fried okra niblet was left in the place. The regulars had cleaned up all of the fare. 3. The door to the restaurant slams open, leaving the door on its hinges. Rain pours in, and in the doorway is a woman in a fine silver thread cloak. In one hand, she holds a katana made of pure copper. 4. Raising the katana in a striking pose with both hands, she says in a gritty, grainy, rough pack of cigs a day kind of voice, "Sigourney McKnight, long time no see. Sorry we won't be able to chat. But unfortunately, you have a date with death." Number 5. The attacker rushes in and doesn't even bother to pull down the hood of her cloak as she moves towards the bar where Sigourney stands. The player who made the first description of the scene then describes an action their character takes as a result of the killing about to happen. Continue this for about 5 minutes or less, otherwise it might go on forever, so maybe set a timer. At the end of the allotted time, 2 things must be true. Number 1, the villain kills the deceased, leaving you battered and ready for revenge. And 2, the villain never, under any circumstance, can state their name. It is a mystery. I'm only going to describe one swordsman's ineffective attempt to save the doomed business partner. Ideally, more swordsmen, 1 for each of the 5 players, would also try to save Sigourney McKnight. Here's the continuation of Sigourney's demise. Crespin Picard hears the word death and immediately begins to panic. He's never been a violent man, but he is brave and strong from all of his years of farm work and carrying heavy laden plates to the tables of hungry customers. He takes a wooden plate and attempts to throw it like a frisbee at the attacker. She simply holds her katana vertically out to the side, allowing the frisbee plate to slice in half as it hits the sharpened blade. The other players will continue to share until the time is up, and here is the final blow. Running up to the bar, which Sigourney is standing behind, the villain swings her katana down in the direction of your business partner's forehead. Sigourney was able to deflect the first blow with a thick iron mug she'd been wiping down before the attack. The second swing hits true, however. And coming at her with a lateral swipe, the copper katana neatly separates Sigourney's head from her body, which drops with a thump behind the bar in a pool of blood. The next plot point is the training. Weeping, your tears mixing with the blood of Sigourney spilt on the floor of Crespin's Krispies, you vow to find this silver cloak wearing, copper katana wielding, venomous vixen and take her down. For Sigourney! For justice! Now, your wooden plate frisbee throwing wouldn't have hurt a blindfolded wildebeest falling asleep in the Serengeti of Africa, only a few feet away from you. You need to learn how to fight with your own sword. Think of this next section as a montage. For many years, you train with the sword. You will need to create your own sword school or choose one of the options provided for you on page 77 of the book. Next, describe the swordmaster you trained under. Name the style of sword fighting that you learned. This can be a real sword fighting style or completely fictitious. Each player should take a turn sharing the previous details and giving a short recount of what the training was like. For Crespin Picard, he learned the style of sword fighting called beehive honey. His weapon is a claymore so heavy to lift that it looks like it's slowly moving through honey when swinging, but then speeds up at the last minute, leaving the target of his attack confused, cleaved in two, and most certainly dead. Crespin's teacher was a small, elderly woman named Agatha. She was world-renowned for her beehive honey technique, mainly because nobody believed she was actually strong enough to lift the claymore as small as she was. Of course, all of her opponents had foolishly doubted her abilities, giving her victory after victory. How do you train the way of the beehive honey, you ask? By stealing beehives, of course, running away from swarms of bees, and then taking the stolen honey and painting on white canvas sheets blowing in the wind. And to emulate the claymore, you paint with an oversized paintbrush the size of a small tree. And you do this over and over and over again. Crespin became a master, and he trained under Agatha until one day she died due to an unforeseen allergic reaction to, you guessed it, a bee sting. The next plot point is the investigation. Time to Sherlock Holmes our way to sweet, sweet revenge. To begin your investigation, you'll use facts that you and your crew established about the villain at the start of the game. All 5 of you have come back together after years of training, and it's time for the helpless hunted prey to become the hunters. And going through each created fact, the player who created the fact will ask 3 other players to answer the following questions on page 72. 1. How has this fact helped us trace the villain? 2. What location does this information lead us to? And 3, what danger awaits us there? Once the questions have been answered, the same player who created the fact and asked the questions will set the scene using the new information. They will also take the first action, describing what their sword fighter attempts to do. Let's use our first created fact about our villain. She is a woman who always wears a cloak of fine silver thread. Question 1. How has this fact helped us trace the villain? We know silver thread-laid cloaks are only created in the port city of Lanu, far to the south. Question 2. This leads us to the city of Lanu, specifically to the market near the docks where most of the bartering and trading occur. And question number 3, what danger awaits us there? Lanu is a notorious holiday destination for vacationing pirates. Each of the 5 scenes you play out, based on each of your 5 villain facts, has a difficulty rating of 2 times the number of players. With 5 players being the recommended amount of players for this hack, that means the difficulty rating of each scene is 10. That is a DR of 10, my friend. Each player will take their actions using their action tokens, just like in Goblin Quest, interpreting their dice rolls, working towards getting 10 successes to match that DR of 10. Thickening the plot. The tipping point is the next plot point, and it's a nuance of this game that is a little bit different than Goblin Quest. Here's how it works. During a scene, once the players have rolled at least half of the number of successes that they need to match the DR, in this case, you need 10 successes, so as soon as you roll 5 successes, the tipping point kicks in. The tipping point is a thematic event that causes a stir. an excitement, some sort of new challenge to keep things moving and fresh. And there's a list of them on page 78, which has great examples, but a good rule to follow is whenever the new story element is added in and introduced, try to insert something that is the opposite of what is happening. If something is dry like a desert, make it wet like a rainforest. If it's red, make it blue. If it's loud, make it quiet. You get the idea. Flip things upside down and round and round. But here's the catch. The heroes cannot catch the villain until they've investigated all 5 of the other clues that they came up with at the beginning of the game. Each scene's 10 successes must be achieved through taking actions and rolling dice. And once you've accomplished this, you move on to discovering the evil scheme, our next plot point. There is a greater conspiracy at work. Your villain has been hard at work all these years working on a master plan to take over or destroy the world. You're going to go around the table and allow each player to describe how the villain has been using his or her peculiar mannerisms, connections, and skills to bring about this mini Armageddon. And finally, the last plot point is the foiling of the evil scheme, your revenge, and hopefully the end. This is the final scene, the hot tamale, the end of the line, the end of the road. Time to take out this bad Johnson. How do you do it? Choose any player to set the final scene and start with the first action. If you want, have a roll-off to decide who gets to go first. You will play through this scene in a similar way, describing actions, rolling dice, resolving each dice one at a time, but here's how it's going to be different from all the other scenes previously. This scene's difficulty rating is higher than all the others. It is equal to 3 times. That's 3 times the number of players. With 5 players, that would be 3 times 5, coming to a DR of 15. You need 15 successes to pull this off. In addition, you have not 1, but 2 tipping points. At 5 successes, you'll add a story element, completely turning the situation upside down. And then you'll do the same thing again when your group achieves 10 successes. At this point, there are only 2 outcomes. You either defeat your nemesis or you die, throwing years of training and hard work straight down the poop chute. So my final thoughts. Truly, the nostalgia of living out a character's story from The Princess Bride is really what makes this hack so much fun. And who would enjoy playing this hack the most with you? Probably other players who have seen and appreciate The Princess Bride. And if they haven't seen The Princess Bride, do you really want to be their friend? I mean, I'm kidding, but not really. Join us next time to learn from our special guest, writer and game designer Robin D. Laws. Robin will share his insight he's gathered from over 30 years in the industry as to what strength and responsibility you carry as a player to make your next game great. The Claim to Game podcast has one mission, helping busy people master tabletop role-playing games one game at a time. Do you enjoy the CTG podcast but find that it could get lost in a mix of notifications that you get throughout the week? What if there was an effortless way to never miss another episode or miss any important deets released ever again? Well, my friend, that's exactly what happens when you are a part of The Lounge. The Lounge is our podcast newsletter ready and waiting for you to be a part of and enjoy. Go ahead and click on the link in the show notes to sign up today. It is time for you to relax and be in the know. And until the next time we make our claim to game, one game at a time.